All right, it is happening. We have 128 gigs of RAM in the Asus Republic of Gamer Flow Z13. I have the 128 gig model. I've benchmarked it, but I've yet to run my Photoshop AI denoise and all of the codec benchmarks inside of Premiere Pro playback. So we have H.264, H.265 for 4K, 25 frames per second, 50 frames per second, 120 frames per second, 6K BRAW, 6K red footage, all of that against the previous model, which is the 32 gigs of RAM. Now, I will have my full review coming out in a number of days. I was waiting for this model because I wanted to put them both together into one review. So sorry for the delay in the full review, but I've just wanted to make the best review possible. So for the meantime, I didn't want to keep you guys waiting any longer, so let's dive in and talk about what these two laptops are capable of inside of Photoshop and Premiere Pro. I'm going to start out inside of Photoshop. So let's go ahead and open up a RAW file inside of Photoshop, and let's test out the AI denoise for each of these devices and see which one is faster. Obviously, most of you are going to vote that the 128 gigs of RAM is going to be faster than the 32 gigs of RAM, but just for funsies, we're going to run the test and see how things go. Now, one question you might be asking is RAM allocation, which I'm so glad you asked. So let's go talk about RAM allocation really quickly before we run this test. So if we come over here, we go to the Asus Armory Crate, and we select System Settings. Ooh, my face was in the way, but I selected System Settings. Click on Free Up Memory. You can see that I have it set to 64 gigs of RAM. That is going to the GPU. I'm going to leave it at 64 gigs of RAM for Photoshop because I want to have 64 gigs of RAM available inside of Photoshop. So it'd be 64 by 64. So 64 gigs of RAM will be attributed to the iGPU. 64 gigs of RAM will be attributed to the CPU usage, so like the system usage. All right, so that's how we have it set up here inside of RAM allocation. Now, let's go ahead and switch back over. Now, if you're curious about the exact availability of these two devices or the exact live pricing, you can head down in the description below, click those links. If you do make a purchase, I'll get a small commission, but at no extra cost to you. But of course, that's what keeps this channel alive and the helpful content coming your way. All right, the first device we're going to start out running the test on is going to be the 128 gig model. You can see the timer is in the middle. I'm going to right click, click Enhance. It's going to pull up my AI denoise window. And now I'm going to click Enhance in 3, 2, 1. Okay. The reloading bar is down here in the corner. It's going, it's going, it's going. $16 seconds. Now, that was on. Pretty sure we were on silent mode. Unplugged from the charger. Just for fun, let's plug into the charger and let's reset. So let's take that 16 silent mode unplugged from the charger. Let's go silent mode plugged into the charger. Let's come back over here to the original image. Right click, click Enhance. And we're going to click Enhance in 3, 2, 1. 16 seconds is the time to beat. We're plugged into the charger on silent mode with 64 gigs of RAM allocated to the iGPU and 64 gigs of RAM allocated to the system. 11 seconds. Okay, so silent mode plugged into the charger is 5 seconds faster. Now, let's take it one step further. Performance mode plugged into the charger. Right now, we're testing the 128 gig model. We're going to right click. We're going to reset. It's on performance mode. I hear very little fan noise right now. And we're going to click Enhance. Okay, performance mode, plugged into the charger, 64 gigs of RAM allocated between iGPU, 64 gigs of RAM to the system. 9 seconds. So performance mode plugged into the charger with 64 gigs of RAM allocated gets you 9 seconds. Now, let's see if we can take this a step further and get even more performance. What if we allocate 96 gigs of RAM to the iGPU We're going to have to restart the computer, so bear with me here. We're going to restart the computer with 96 gigs RAM allocation, and we are going to see if that beats out our 9-second time. While we're waiting, let's go ahead and see what 32 gigs is capable of. I'm going to go silent mode at first, unplug from the charger. See what we got here. There we go, silent mode, unplugged from the charger. Inside of Photoshop, let's go ahead and grab that photo. Open with Adobe. Program error, come on. Don't do this to me. Not in the middle of a live stream. You wouldn't dare. All right, let's try this photo. All right. Okay, we're opening up. We're rebooting here on the 128 gig model. Okay, there we go. All right. Enhance. This is the 32 gig model, and I'm almost positive I have 8 gigs of RAM allocated to the iGPU. And let's go ahead and click Enhance. 3, 2, 1. Silent mode, 8 gigs allocated. Ooh, it's pretty snappy. It's pretty snappy, coming up on 16 seconds here. It just rolled into 19 seconds as I finished up. So honestly, on silent mode, unplugged from the charger, not half bad. If you're like only got budget for the 32 gig model, that's impressive. Now, plugged into the charger is a whole nother story. So let's run this one over here first. So remember 19 seconds over there, but let's run the 128 test while we have the 96 allocation to the iGPU. Let's see how much more performance that gets. Remember, the time to beat is 9 seconds. Time to beat is 9 seconds. And we have 96 gigs RAM allocation to the iGPU, performance mode plugged into the charger. All right, here we go. Let's go right click. And here we go. 3, 2, 1. Time to beat is 9 seconds. Oh, just like exactly the same. Okay, let's try one more thing. Let's see if we give lots of RAM back to the... We're going to give lots of RAM back to the system. So we're going to go all the way down to just 16 gigs allocated to the iGPU. No, I do not do gaming. I am not a gaming channel. We're here for creative professionals. Really, really niche, but that's what you'll find here on this channel. I take any laptop, including gaming laptops, and I just run creator-focused benchmarks. You are sitting on the #1 channel in the world for creators and trying to choose the right laptops for their needs. So thanks for joining the live stream, Chance. Really appreciate it. Okay, let's go ahead while this is rebooting, and I'm going to take the charger out of here and pull it over to here. Okay. Now let's go. 9 seconds is really the time to beat. So let's just go all the way into... Oh, it got really dim on me there. Oh, there we go. Let's just go straight to plugged into the charger on performance mode. I'm going to go ahead and cancel this and try and open the original photo that we had just to make sure there's no discrepancies. Let's see if it'll open this time. It was acting up last time. Okay, all right, perfect. Okay, 9 seconds is the time to beat. Does RAM make a huge difference for this test? Let's find out. So at just about 10 seconds. So all that RAM allocation, and they're pretty much neck and neck. Pretty awesome. So whether you're looking to buy the 32 gig model, the 64, or the 128, for this specific test, it looks like they're pretty much neck and neck. Now, however, I will give you a little bit of a sneak peek. The 32 gig model scored a 10,000 in the Puget Systems Photoshop benchmark. Okay. The 128 gig model scored a 14,700. So about a 4,000 point difference. It is a substantially stronger system overall because of the RAM allocation. Okay, we have decreased the RAM allocation for this test from the iGPU and pushed most of it for the system. So let's see if that is the winning ticket to provide us with a result that will beat the 9-second AI denoise feature. Okay, so we've gone ahead and decreased the RAM allocation from the iGPU to 16 gigs. Okay, and so that means most of the RAM is going to be used for the system. And the time to beat is 9 seconds. We're on performance mode, plugged into the charger. Let's see which way this computer runs this test best. Time to beat is 9 seconds. Nine seconds. Okay, so no matter where you allocate the RAM, 9 seconds is going to be the time to beat on any system. Now, I just ran the Asus ROG Strix Scar, and it did this test in 3 seconds. So a dedicated GPU is still the de facto for getting the best performance in computations of this nature. But I wanted to show you that this is no slouch in Photoshop performance. All right, Lightroom Classic. Let's open it up, and let's do a 99 RAW photo import and see how that works. So that is what we're about to be working on now. We're loading up Lightroom Classic. After this, we'll be looking at Premiere Pro, 4K and 6K video editing. But for now, we are looking at Lightroom Classic. We're going to load in 99 images into Lightroom, see how long it takes to import. Unfortunately, I already imported into here. It took, how long did it take? Let's see here. Where's my other computer? Okay, give me 1 second. I need to get my other computer because I can just tell you the time. Just figuring out how to change everything up just will take too much time. So I'm just going to grab the result here off of the computer. Raw photo load. Actually, you know what? I think I might be able to. Okay, I think I should be able to. Let's try this. Let's just pull the timer up and see what happens if I try and import all these. All right, let's try this again. So I'm going to go over here, and we're going to start with the 128 gigs of RAM. We have 16 allocated to the iGPU, which means most is going to be allocated to the system. And let's go ahead and import all these right now. 3, 2, 1. All right, we're in. Wait. What just happened? Done? Why am I all grayed out here? This is acting really funky. So I think it was about 18 seconds, but that was weird. It like grayed out on me. Okay. Lightroom. All right. Previous import. Okay, so they all imported. All right, so it's about 18 seconds for the import, which that is completely on par with other devices of this nature. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to test the AI denoise inside of Lightroom. Go. 3, 2, 1. It should be around 9 seconds. Ooh, a little bit slower. Yeah, Lightroom's always a little bit slower. So just at about 11 seconds, it was about 11:4 right before I made the click. Versus Lightroom versus the 32 gigs, which should be about the same. So this is an interesting situation. So according to AI denoise, doing this specific workflow, they're pretty much neck and neck. If we run the same settings, no matter if you're changing the RAM allocation, it's about the same. However, if you're running multiple Photoshop layers and you're doing tons of multitasking, that is where your system will bottleneck rather quickly at 32 gigs of RAM. So the 64 or 128 gigs of RAM makes a big difference in, say, like Premiere Pro. Playback, we're going to see some differences. There's some differences in 3D modeling, which when I do my full review, I'll show you that. And of course, in the overall Photoshop score for Puget Systems Photoshop benchmark, we see the 10,000 on the 32 gigs of RAM versus the 14,700 on the 128 gig model. So overall, we're going to see better performance, but it really depends on your specific use case. For me, I think the best bang for buck is going to be the 64 gig model. Reason being, it's $100 difference. Last time I checked, again, if you want to check the live pricing, links are in the description below, but it's about a $100 difference between the 32 gig and the 64 gig, and you're not going to be disappointed if you go with 64. Do you need 128? I don't know. That might be a little overkill, especially when you see some of my results that I'll showcase in the full review. But if you can afford it, it's not going to hurt. But if you're really struggling and you're trying to maximize your budget, I would go 64 gigs of RAM. Okay, let's go ahead and head on over to Premiere Pro. I want to test something. And while I'm heading on over to Premiere Pro, I'm going to switch the iGPU settings because I know in Premiere Pro, iGPU settings are going to make a big difference. And I'm going to do 60. Oh, should I do 64 and 64 or 96? 16 gigs of RAM for the rest of the system. Yeah, it should be fine. Let's do 96 gigs of RAM allocation to the iGPU for these Photoshop tests and see what kind of performance we are going to have. We're going to start out in Sony a7S III 4K footage. It's going to be H.264, 25 frames per second, 422, and we're going to load that in as soon as this thing boots back up. Thank you guys so much for coming on the live stream, hanging here with me, doing these live results. As I mentioned, I do have the full dedicated review coming out soon. I wanted to get the benchmark results and my thoughts on the 128 gig model before I launched that review. I could have done it before. I could have launched it sooner, but the model isn't even available for purchase yet. So I thought, why rush it? Why not just make the most comprehensive review I can to the best of my abilities? When it comes out, please give me feedback. If you don't think that I covered everything that you would want to know, I'd be happy to get your feedback. Have you drop that comment so I could make sure my follow-up review has more details in it to help you. But I wanted to get the 128 gig model thoughts into that original review because I want that review to be like I just want to see that be the most valuable review I've ever made. I just want people to walk away from that being like, wow, I can so confidently make a decision on if this is the right laptop for me or not. That's my goal in every video. It's not to entertain you. It's not necessarily to make you, love me and my charisma. It's to help you with a purchasing decision. That is the goal of my channel. And sometimes it kind of injures my ability to grow this, big following and be fun and fancy and whatever. But I just care most if you guys get the information you need, and you can make a good qualified decision. So I hope that comes through in my reviews. I keep them simple. I don't get too detailed because I'm not an overly detailed person. I never look at my purchases in the nitty gritty. I want to know the core fundamental reasons I'm using a product, make sure it does those well. And that's kind of how I approach my reviews. Keep them sweet, keep them as brief as I can, but give you all the value and details you need. Okay, with that really long discussion on my thoughts on the Z13 and my coming review, let's load up some footage here. Starting with A7S III, 422. We're going to load in the 25 frames per second. Get rid of this phone. It's kind of in my way. And I'm going to pull this over a tad. And let's load up some of this footage. Ooh, I hate how... One thing I don't like about using trackpads is whenever you go to slide anything on the timeline, it's like, woo, we're gone. Look how far that goes. That's so annoying. All right, let's switch over to this camera so you guys can see this better. There we go. Okay. All right, let's get these three. Okay, we're about to start the A7S III. All right, full quality. Let's grab the properties so you can see exactly what this footage is. Media. There we go. 422 10-bit. H.264. We're rocking and rolling. I am anticipating 0 drop frames for this one. Whew. Anybody else catch a little cold this spring? That's been fun. All right. 0 drop frames, which I anticipated, so I'm not going to hang on here long. Let's move on to 50 frames per second. Here we go. This is the H.265 at 50 frames per second. We're going to change the sequence settings to match. Pull this over. And yes, this is the great Tech Notice. I don't personally have a Sony camera. He was a gentleman enough to share some footage with us. And let's see how this thing performs. Remember, we're on performance mode. We're plugged into the charger. And we'll do some other tests once we see how it handles this footage. Here we go. Let's pull up that footage for you real quick. Sequence. There we go. Media properties. There we go. So you can see exactly what we're testing here. Go. 0 drop frames so far. Smooth footage. No big deal. With that in mind, let's drop down to silent mode. Bam. Close that off. Because we do have a bit of fan noise. Not sure if you can hear that through the microphone. I do that sometimes, and I don't even know if y'all can hear that, but nonetheless. All right, silent mode. Here we go. Plugged into the charger still. No drop frames, no problem. Again, we're going to be looking at, this is 50 frames per second. We'll be looking at 120 frames per second. We'll be looking at 6K BRAW and 6K red footage as well. Right now, we're looking at the Sony A7S III. All right, that's good. Now let's unplug from the charger. Silent mode. And see what we got going on here. 3, 2, 1. Engage. 50 frames per second. H.265. 420. A7S III. 10-bit footage. Clean as a whistle. No drop frames. Now, the real test, the Big Lebowski is going to be the 120 frames per second. So, let's see what this here device is capable of. All right, scroll up. Where is it? Where's my 120 frames per second? There it is, 120 frames per second. This stuff is always heavy. Even the Strix Scar struggled with this footage. So the Strix Scar with the latest RTX 5090 dropped 500 frames in the first 45 seconds. Was it the first 45 seconds? Yeah. So we'll see how this thing does. Let's not even try to do unplug from the charger. Let's just not waste our time here. Let's go plugged into the charger. Let's go performance mode. Nope, let's go turbo mode. And let's see how this thing does. Let's let it get adjusted. Adjust the speed. Huh, interesting. Okay, here we go. 120 frames per second. This is H dot. Is this? I can't remember if this is H dot or not. It's 10-bit. No, it's HEVC. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Dropping frames right off the bat, to be expected, but let's see how smooth it is. So you can see our friend here, Tech Notice in the middle, telling us a thing or two about life. It actually looks fairly smooth. In the first 20 seconds, 760 drop frames. Honestly, not terrible, because last year's RTX 4070 and the 4060 and 4050 would have dropped about 3,000 drop frames by now. Now, in the first 30 seconds, 1,000 drop frames. So it's a bit faster than the previous models. And you can see it's actually running quite smooth. So I pause it, start it again. It doesn't lag. So not half bad. And remember, this is 96. But let's compare this to the 32 gig model. If we can pull this up really quickly while we're playing around here. Let's go Sony. So we're going to pull up the 32 gig model with this same project. And we're going to go side by side here and see how the 32 gig model with 8 gigs of RAM allocation will do. No, we'll probably go. Well, we'll check. We'll check. Okay, let's go here. All right. System settings, free up RAM, 4 gigs. I'm going to go to 16. Dang it, it's going to make me reboot. All right, it's going to make me reboot. No big deal, because I want to get a baseline over here. So over on the 128 gig model, you can see now on the screen, I'm going to get a baseline at 30 seconds. And then I'm going to come over here. Oh, it's updating. Gosh, I hope this doesn't take long. Okay, that's fine. We'll keep moving through. We'll keep testing stuff, and we'll come back to that. I'm going to get a baseline at 30 seconds. Okay, 890 drop frames. So everybody just remember 890 drop frames. That's pretty solid. So while that's updating, let's just move on to 6K. 890 drop frames is our baseline that we're comparing to the 32 gig model to see how it does. Okay? Write that down in the comments, somebody. 890. We don't want to forget. Let's do 6K BRAW. Come on, nobody's writing it down. My memory's not that good. Y'all are trusting on bad memory here. Okay. Here we go. Let's drop this down. Slide this over. This is 6K BRAW footage, 12:1, full quality, turbo mode. Let's have some fun here, though, and do unplug from the charger on silent mode, because those fans were really cruising. We have 96 gigs of RAM allocation to the iGPU. Ooh, we dropped a frame right off the bat. Let's let it kind of adjust itself, because there's no way it should drop that many frames that quickly. Oh, kind of jumpy. Shocking. Try again. Oh, a little jumpy. Well, we'll check in the first 30 seconds here. It looks as if the 32 gig RAM is coming back slowly. It's doing its update thing. I was worried that would happen. All right, we're here at 15, 16, 17 seconds. It's dropping frames, so I'm curious in the first 30 seconds how many frames it drops. Here we go, approaching 30 seconds. Silent mode, 6K BRAW. 369 drop frames. Are we on silent mode? It's still kind of loud. Come on, computer. Yep, silent mode. Okay, now let's go ahead and test silent mode plugged into the charger for 6K BRAW, because that dropped more frames than I had hoped for. All right, starting over. Okay, there's minimal drop frames. You can see it's still green, 0 drop frames so far. But I would say we do have quite a substantial amount of fan noise. Get our handy dandy fan noise meter here. Here we go. Check out the fan noise. So silent mode is producing 53 decibels of fan noise. But in the first 45 seconds, only 27 drop frames. So can you deal with that? Can you not? That's the real question. All right, the next thing we're waiting for is the 120 frames per second on the 32 gig RAM model. Let's see if it really makes a big difference to be able to allocate 96 gigs of memory to your iGPU. But while we're waiting, we need to go and move on to 6K red footage, because I don't want to waste your time here. Still loading up. It says it's 100%, but we're still loading. All right. Red footage, silent mode, which is not so silent at 53 decibels, should I add. Plugged into the charger. Dropping frames right off the bat. The time lagged a little bit there off the start, and then it caught up with itself. But in the first 10 seconds, 113 drop frames. Okay, computer's coming back on for the 32 gig model. Okay, first 30 seconds, red footage. 279 drop frames. Not bad. Not great, but not bad. Let's see if we pause, engage again, pause, engage again. It's pretty smooth. Let's go one more time. Updates, come on. This thing keeps updating. I didn't want you to update. Oh, there we go. We're back. We're back in the saddle again. Okay. Loading. 15 seconds here. All right, the first 30 seconds, 20 seconds. Come on, Bessie. If you like to walk with potatoes. All right. 310 drop frames in the first 30 seconds. Performance mode. Let's see what happens, shall we? Since we already have a ton of fan noise. Oh, it's on turbo mode. What? No wonder. There we go. Okay. Basically, take that back. Come on, people. Let's go back to BRAW real quick. That was a load of crap. Now let's play back. I forgot I had switched it. So there is silent mode. A far more respectable 46 decibels of fan noise. That is much more tolerable. And in the first 30 seconds, let's see how many drop frames we have. 219. Not tragic. Very usable. Now we are going over to the 32 gig RAM model. Our goal is 890 drop frames. No help to you guys. Man, you guys didn't even comment that. God, I remembered it. What would we do? What would you do without me here? I have to remember all the numbers. I got to do the live stream and remember the numbers. Come on. Come on. Okay, here we go. We have this computer up with 120 frames per second and full quality. And our goal is 30 seconds, 890 drop frames. If we can hit that, that proves that you don't need so much iGPU RAM. Let's find out. Oh, wait. Got to plug in. Okay, hold on. Performance mode. There we go. Okay. No, I don't want to do all this right now. Come on. Okay, there we go. Plugged in. Performance mode. Okay, pretty smooth picture, you can see. But our goal is 890 drop frames. And remember, this is the 32 gig. Ooh, it's getting jumpy. He's getting jumpy. Really jumpy. This is what I was talking about. The iGPU, that ability to allocate that 96 gigs of RAM is very helpful. We're going to see how many drop frames it had. 30 seconds coming up. Here we go. 3,000. See? 3 times the amount of drop frames when you are unable to allocate a lot of RAM. So that ability to allocate all that RAM, to turn it in from just regular system RAM into VRAM for the iGPU does make a big difference. So that, in a nutshell, shows the value of being able to utilize more iGPU. Now, let's go ahead and try and simulate what it would be like to buy the 64 gig RAM version. This is not a perfect science, but, you know, because we still have more RAM allocation available for the system. But let's just switch over. Wait, no. Oh, crap, that doesn't make sense. Oh, rats. I needed to allocate 32. Because technically, when you have the 64 gig system, you can't allocate all the RAM to just the iGPU. And now I have to wait for it to reboot. This is a travesty. Okay, but having more RAM is definitely an advantage. You've seen that very clearly here. Okay, don't save. We'll just close that down. All right. So we're having to reload, and then we'll have to reboot one more time if we want to do this totally legit test. So we're rebooting right now. As you can see, we have a black screen. It's coming back. Coming back. Come on. Don't worry about me. Okay. Now, ode to joy, not ode to joy, ode, meaning a salute to joy. We have to do this again. Okay, so we'll go system, and let's see what our options are. System settings. Man, it's getting hot in here. 32. 32 is our option. Okay, so we're going to allocate 32, and we'll come on back, and we will see how many drop frames occur on 120 frames per second within the first 30 seconds. So we had about 3,300 for the 32 gigs of RAM model. For the 128 gigs of RAM model with 96 allocated, we had 890 drop frames. So now let's take the 128 gig model, allocate 32 gigs of RAM to try and simulate what it would be like to have the 64 gig RAM model and see what kind of drop frames we have for the really the heaviest footage, in my opinion, that we can test. The 120 frames per second Sony a7S III. Awesome. We're coming back. You guys' patience is phenomenal as we get this rolling. Go ahead and just close down this bad boy. If you like to... Oh, but now you see my camera. Would you rather see the laptop or the camera? Probably the laptop. Oh, but you can still see the camera. Could you see the camera the whole time? Okay, we're back. 2, 3. We'll just do this. This makes more sense. Put that there. Put this here. All right, it is time to test. All right, we are testing as if we had the 64 gig model because we've allocated 32 gigs of RAM to the iGPU. in the system settings, and we are looking perfect at 128 gigs, 120 frames per second. I think it's already loaded on the timeline. No. Is that? Yes, it is. Perfect. Okay, it's already loaded on the timeline, so we are good to go there. We're plugged into the charger on performance mode. Let's double check here. And our goal is 890. We're trying to be, I mean, it'd be great if obviously we could beat 3000, but our goal is 890. Okay, here we go. Let's push it over so you can see. Can't leave you hanging. So we are dropping some frames, but as you can see, it's pretty smooth. In the first 30 seconds, we want to have obviously way less than 3,300, but how much more than 890 are we going to have? "24 seconds, moment of truth coming up. $1,137. So that 64 gigs simulation is definitely an advantage over the 32 gigs. Now, it's not a perfect test, obviously, because this isn't the actual 64 gig version. It's the 128 gig version, but it gets us most of the way there. All right, that is as much as we're going to cover in the live stream today. If you are curious, again, about the exact pricing and availability, links are in the description below. The models should be coming available sometime around April 19th to April 23rd. That's the rumor has it. That's when the model's coming available. My live review will launch on April 20th. All goes well. That's the plan. So definitely keep an eye out. Click or tap the screen here if you want to check out that live review once it goes live. Thank you so much for watching today, and I will catch you guys in the next one.